Thank you all for showing up. How many, just a quick show of hands, how many people here are involved in producing live sports streams for a prep or a college or a youth sports or a regional sports league? Can I see a quick show of hands? Hoping at least a few go up. Very good. And then others are involved in technology or, go ahead and, what are you guys here to do? Just give me a little bit of. Monitoring tools, okay. And back there?
We work for Future Report. We have our VOD on it.
Nice. Awesome, okay. Well, thanks guys for joining. Hopefully this will be a great panel for you. I've got some great panelists. First up, and by the way, let me just say a quick thing. I'm going to make a quick note for one of our panelists, and then we'll kind of move on to do a discussion. That is Brad Sexton, who is not here because his entire family was evacuated. He lives in Agoura. I felt like that was a good enough excuse. My prayers and thoughts are with him and his family. And so support lafd.org, by the way, if you want to give to the fire. The fire departments are working really hard. And so I just wanted to give him a little shout out. His company does a lot of great stuff for a lot of different folks. And one of the things I was going to say, so he's the CEO of this group. They've done 20 college football games and 40 basketball games for Facebook Live in the past year. And so one of the questions that we asked him on the prep call was, well, what's the difference today producing live sports off of Facebook versus what you used to do or what he's historically done and what his core business is? And basically kind of put up this quote from our prep calls, right? So they've now got a social producer in the truck. They've got these sideline producers that are the star of the show. They're engaging with the audience, and in one case, directing the sideline producer to go up and meet with a fan and have a little interview with the fan. And so he's kind of just one of these guys that's been in the business for so many years as a traditional producer for the major networks. And so to hear him on the prep call, I wish he could be here with us today, talking about the fact that a lot of this interactive streaming has really come of age. So I'll leave it there for Brad Sexton, Live Media Group, and then I'm going to introduce my panel here. So first on my left, I have Derek Owen. He is the founder and CEO of ScoreStream, a seasoned technology executive, really quite a seasoned entrepreneur as well, focused recently on user-generated content, and the founder and CEO of ScoreStream, fascinating company that he will talk more about. And one interesting thing, I like to get one interesting thing out of all my panelists, and one of the interesting things I would say about Derek Owen, he was COO of MP3.com. So a quick show of hands, how many people know MP3.com? Please raise your hands. We have the right age group here. So Derek, introduce yourself and give me a fun story about MP3.com and then intro yourself into ScoreStream. Segue yourself into ScoreStream.
Fun stories about MP3.com. I guess the most fun thing about MP3.com, I'd say, the recent kind of funny one was they've done a series of articles in the last couple of weeks about the alumni of MP3.com. And so we actually just got together for a photo shoot last week. And there's probably 36 of us who went on to found multiple startups since then. So that's been kind of fun.
Awesome. So good. And I'll go back and down the line and we'll go back. So JD Fox, Director of Partnerships and Product Management at PrestoSports and Stretch Internet. How many people know Stretch Internet? It's one of the oldest, really pioneers of streaming. Since 2010, I think you've been doing streaming for college sports, and I have here 725 collegiate programs are streaming customers. You've also got another 1,500 colleges that I guess are kind of website customers. Talk to us a little bit about your background and about Stretch Internet briefly.
Yeah, so Stretch Internet started in 2003 as an audio streaming company, made the transition to video and made it quite well to where now the video side is the important part of our business and where we're really focused. So we're hitting the college and university space in the US and Canada. And I was full-time employee number 1 in 2010. We've been around since 2003. PrestoSports is was a competitor. We're kind of one big happy family now with also a company called SID Help, all under the PrestoSports banner. So we have a website platform, we have a stats entry platform, and the video platform with Stretch Internet as well.
Awesome. And then to his left, we have David Bober. David's an investor and board member in a company called Keemotion. He also has a great and interesting background for this conversation as an EVP at Octagon. That's a sports marketing agency, one of the largest, part of the Interpublic group. And the other really interesting thing, and I'll let you say a little more about it, David, is you've been involved heavily in youth prep sports, basically high school sports, involved with the New York public education system as well as Chicago. And so you can basically, yeah, one interesting thing was you were Mia Hamm's agent. So you can give us your stories there. Exactly.
Thank you. Wow.
And go ahead and segue into what you do for Keemotion
Sure.
and what you're doing in this space.
So I was part of the original ownership group that bought Keemotion about 4 years ago, which is a fully automated production company. So we film primarily in basketball and hockey right now, but we film practices and games fully automated, no cameraman. So we have about 10 NBA teams as clients. We have some of the top collegiate basketball programs in the country, including Kansas and Villanova. And then we have a number of clients in Europe that use us for both a coaching tool. Our cameras are installed in the facilities and the production is fully automated. So everything that's happening on the court is being filmed without a cameraman. And then the content is sort of taggable and sortable by the coaches to be able to use to help coach the players. And then in Europe, because the rights are a little bit more accessible to us, our content is broadcast quality. So a lot of European leagues use us as their feed for their production. My other company, called the Public-Private Network, is a firm focused on creating public-private partnerships with large urban public school districts. So New York City is our largest client, the New York City Public Schools. And we've raised about $80 million in the last 12 years for sports and phys ed programs from the private sector.
And we'll segue now into a little demo video that I think is pretty sweet. It gives you a good sense. So what you're going to see is, you're going to see how one camera basically is finding and tracking the players on the court and framing the video appropriately. So you've got a little bit of a mirrored effect. So here it's tracking players. It's going to put a frame. And then as it goes back to the other side of the court, you'll see how that then results in a production action, essentially kind of zooming in on that frame.
Yeah, so the hardware is off the shelf, and the magic is in the algorithms in the software built into the cameras. The cameras aren't moving at all. It's just the algorithms are taking inputs from players, the scoreboard, the referee, and the ball, shedding whatever content the consumer or the fan doesn't need to see, so that the size of the files are small enough to be streamable, and then giving you basically that camera one, primarily that camera one view that constitutes a majority of what you see on sports, on large sports broadcasts.
And just as a casual observer, as I look at the prep sports, I mean, the cameras are getting better every year, right? And as you start to pay attention, and you see like the NBA, for example, on their mobile stream, they're going to zoom in on the players and so forth more appropriately. It makes a huge difference in terms of engagement.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'll kind of segue that a little bit into a question about where are we in automated sports production. So we've got this. You've also got some companies doing automated highlights, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
But talk to me a little bit about how important it is to use this type of automated production to lower the costs and therefore hopefully then engage audiences more fully with your streams.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we're in an interesting time in sports production because there's a ton of content out there and the consumer is sort of elusive and they want to see things in a much more brief way. But traditional production, where a production truck rolls into a game, is quite expensive. And at Keemotion, the vision was always that we felt that we could offer relatively close quality, maybe not as many camera angles, but a relatively close quality of product, and therefore sort of commoditize production a little bit so that it starts to attack the middle and the bottom of the pyramid, because the NBA really doesn't need us. Now, Steve Kerr, the coach of the Warriors, he loves our product because it's a coaching tool. We obviously are not going to compete with TNT for the rights to the NBA. But when you start to drill down into Division II, Division III, European leagues, then they have a real need to make the economics work. it still costs, I'm just going to throw out a random number. If you want to do a women's basketball game on Fox, because we have Marquette women's team as an example, if they rolled a truck into the arena and filmed and had to produce even bare bones, it would be, let's call it $100, and our offering would cost $1 in relative terms. So maybe you don't get as many close-ups, maybe you don't get as many camera angles, but you get a high-res camera one view of a women's college basketball game on Fox Sports West or Fox Sports Online, and they're actually able to monetize that in a way that they wouldn't, where it might be a loss leader because they have a bigger relationship with the conference or with the league. It's not a loss leader in our model. They can actually monetize it because it's so inexpensive.
And I'll take also that to JD. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the past year with ESPN Plus. And you've got these OTT plays like the Flow and the Fubo. I guess Fubo is a little bit more pro, but take me through the dynamics. Your company, Stretch Internet, provided streaming services to colleges and I guess also prep, but was recently acquired by another company providing kind of a full set of digital services. Take me through what's happened with ESPN Plus and how that's impacted your clients. Who's decided to go with ESPN, who hasn't? Take me through that dynamic.
Yeah, it's a completely changing dynamic in the college space of rights acquisition as a monetization vehicle. So what we have with ESPN Plus and what we have with what Flow's doing is basically they're paying up front for the contract for a year of the rights to the actual footage. So the only money that institution's getting is an upfront check, and then how Flow and ESPN are making their monies on the back end. So basically, it's the idea of trying to hit an audience that is not just your fans, but trying to hit a broader audience. So what you're doing when a school wants to sign up with ESPN Plus or Flow Sports is they want to get part of a bigger network and try to draw in fans that may not know they want to watch that material. So that's been a big change because the pay-per-view industry really for a long time has been drilled down to, okay, I want to watch games from this conference or I want to watch games from this institution. But we've seen a change now to where they're trying to make it a more global set of available viewing options and have everything down in one screen and have somebody be able to watch a game from Europe and be able to watch a game from Washington State in the same kind of industry and the same viewpoint from an OTT standpoint or from a website standpoint. So it's been a change just because we've always marketed pay-per-view in our company as kind of a direct-to-consumer. It's like it's a revenue share. The school gets their cut, we get a little bit, and everybody's happy at the end of the day. Now that's kind of changed to a competitive marketplace in terms of how much is this content worth and predictive model of how much is this content worth. I mean, is the conference going to have a good year in one of the major sports in football or men's basketball to where you're going to drive viewership? Or is it going to have a bad year? And, I mean, there's a lot of things you can't predict. So it's very interesting to see how that plays out. I mean, really, this fall has been the first true test with a large scale of conferences and schools trying to do this. So we're kind of taking a wait-and-see approach on how it goes. So
this is a fascinating segue, I think, to Derek and what you're doing with ScoreStream is the idea that you have major live sports and media broadcasts, basically, where they take the Super Bowl, hundreds of millions of people basically watching, and then you kind of got to go down the line all the way down to like youth and prep, where it's really about heavy fan engagement, where it's about the parents and the kids. And one of the things that I find so fascinating, and Derek, I should let you kind of introduce your company, but ScoreStream essentially is kind of crowdsourcing data from youth and prep games, and in the process is creating this, I think, this very Snapchat-like engaged experience that if I'm a pro league, I actually kind of want to tap into more of that. So with that as a segue, tell us what ScoreStream does and how it's evolved over the last couple of years and what you see coming.
Sure, yeah, so ScoreStream's a crowdsourcing platform. I think if you put the context in the fall for, like, call it football, each week you've got 16 pro football games, 100 D1 college football games, and 7,000 high school football games. And so our goal was, could you actually capture all that information, real-time scores, photos, videos, and chat across that whole ecosystem? The high school I went to, I was not an athlete, but Ronnie Lott went to my high school, a bunch of other famous athletes, Jeff Conine and others. And when I was a kid, you'd wake up and read 6 pages of prep reports, and that newspaper's dead now, as most newspapers are across the country with a couple of exceptions. And so our thesis was that you could actually do something like Waze, the traffic application, whereas in the past they took helicopters out to tell you if the traffic was bad. Now they use smartphones to do the same sort of thing for local sports media. And so that's sort of where we started. And again, that problem set of the 7,000 high school football games that happened, if you were to fast forward to today, we actually cover about 6,800 of those games on a real-time basis. And we syndicate that back out to all the TV station groups, newspaper groups, radio station groups. The Associated Press, up until 2 years ago, we're tracking high school football scores and basketball scores with 50 humans in Spokane. We do that now with 10 people in our company and a crowd with, last month we had 1.4 million active users. And I think an interesting part of what we do is that if you look at the big sports metadata providers, the Stats, the Sport Radar, Grace Note and whatnot, they cover about 100,000 games a year with about between 1,000 to 2,000 people. We cover about 675,000 games a year with 11 people. So it's a different animal. And I think a lot of it has been, and when people struggle with what we do about crowdsourcing, how can this work? Well, when you get to a certain amount of scale and a certain amount of engagement, if there's a wrong score and you have 1 million users, people tell you immediately. And so around that, though, we've really tried to focus on, besides getting the scores, creating the ability to create context around the media you create. So I think one of the things we saw early with like Periscope was, I'm watching a Periscope stream of a hockey game. Okay, who's playing? What period is it? Who's winning? What's the score? There's no context. So we've created a whole bunch of tools that let people overlay metadata onto their photos or videos on a real-time basis. And so we've rolled out a bunch of products that make it look like Snapchat for sports.
And including a desktop application, right, that enables folks that are on the ground to kind of, graphicize the photos and things like that.
Yeah, so all this stuff in our system, so we also do college and pros. I neglected to say that. We do semi-pro football, youth sports, whatnot. But yeah, so we actually created on our smartphone applications the ability, if you take a picture right now on ScoreStream and you're at a game, you can flick through the different filters and you'll have player cards, you'll have all kinds of stuff. But if you're a hardcore power user, we were inspired by a lot of what the colleges are doing around creating promotional graphics and high-end graphics packages where they hire agencies to do it. So we built a desktop application for Mac and Windows where beyond the smartphone app, if you want to get really hardcore, you can actually go do it on a desktop. And all that metadata that we have around scores, colors, logos is fed into that platform.
Very good. I'll take a quick break to make sure that you guys are generating some questions. We've got a good panel here to ask, get your questions answered. So be thinking of those questions. Are there any questions right now, by the way? Dying questions? Okay, good. JD, let's talk about cellular bonding. So what's going on in the youth sports market or the college prep sports market in terms of infrastructure? Are most schools using these types of tools now? Or talk to us about a time when, or a particular case where youth cellular bonding is being used in order to increase access to streams.
Yeah, I think infrastructurally, things are better than they ever have been in the college and university space. And what that has meant actually is that a lot of the traditional sports, indoor and on-campus facility sports are covered. So now what's next? And what we're finding is cross country, golf, some of these things that are really tough to broadcast from a traditional college sense of, okay, we're going to set up 2 cameras and connect to the internet or something of that nature. So the cellular bonding opportunities have grown exponentially because we're seeing people take a gator cart and a camera and follow the leader of a cross-country meet. And we also have a lot of national championships, so we're the official streaming provider of the NAIA. They've done NAIA golf championships where we have not just like the 18th hole, which you can probably run something from the clubhouse to connectivity-wise, but have like the 10th hole, have an on-course reporter following the leader, things like that were not necessarily something you saw in the college and university produced space. You might see it obviously from the ESPN and CBS side of things, but that bonding technology has really opened up the whole thing. And the other big thing, and I think Derek touched on it well, is you've got to have context. So now we're seeing cloud graphics go in with the bonding solutions so that you can actually have scores and things, and it's not just a visual.
So just take me through that a little bit in a little more depth. So you've got, like with the golf example, somebody's got a backpack, they're taking particular scenes of the game, and then it's going up into the cloud and being switched in the cloud, or?
Yeah, so that's kind of the next step of where we're going. Technology is switching that cloud. So basically what we've always done is we've done a dedicated, so here is your stream for the 18th hole, here's your stream for the 10th hole, here's your stream following the leaders. Very similar to what you see at a US Open digital experience or some of those things that the pro golfers do. There's focused and featured groups and featured holes, and we kind of individually go to that and have multiple streams and use like a quad box player or something if somebody wants to watch all of them at the same time. But you mentioned cloud switching, and that's something technology-wise that I think we're very, very close to seeing at a much larger level in terms of delivery, and also because we have way more low latency solutions and possibilities that are rolling down the pipeline. So we're not too far off from that.
Let me ask a quick follow-up on, so you think about your customer base, you've got these additional technologies like cellular bonding, so I can have a camera going around. You've got the interactivity off of Twitch and Facebook and the like. You've got the ability to do automated clipping and highlights. What are the things that pop to the top of the wish list of your customer base when they're trying to sort of, I guess, renew a contract with you, or think back in the last 6 months, major contract renewals and things like that? What are the things that your customers want most from you that you're trying to deliver, but maybe a little more challenging than the customer might realize, and it's sort of in your future strategy to figure out how to get that right?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in the current marketplace, it's very conference driven in terms of the video streaming deals. It's not the individual schools making the decisions, it's the conference. So what you have is you have the haves and have-nots in each conference. You have the schools that have the infrastructure and the money, and you have the schools that don't. So what you have to work with the conference on is finding a happy medium in terms of broadcast quality. So one of the things we've been really focused on is creating a conference blueprint, having them have actual goals set for the conference-wide, not only to bring the bottom up, but just continually increase the quality of the stream. So in terms of technology, what are we doing for that? You touched on camera technology earlier. The cameras are getting better and better, and they're getting cheaper. And also the amount of wireless solutions, whether it's cellular bonding or something like Sling Studio, where you've got a very cheap way of doing wireless cameras today. So we're seeing kind of a case where the wish list for the customers is better quality and a uniform product. So really it's finding the best quality we can get for no matter what the budget is of the particular school, but then having a unified graphics platform or unified instant replay platform that everybody's using,
right,
and having a consistency from the viewership. Because the thing that I think is often lost is that your main fan base in the D2 and D3 space that's going to be watching your games is the opposing team's fans. It's not going to be your own fans.
Right.
So when you have a conference-wide situation, you want to make sure that your feed is as good as the other feeds in the conference, because your fans are going to be watching all the other schools. They're not necessarily going to be watching your school.
Very good. Derek, talk to me also a little bit about that rivalry dynamic. How much is that driving your usage and engagement? And also, if you could segue a little bit into your business model. How are you thinking about making money as a company? That helps us maybe understand a little more about the dynamic of the youth sports space.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, most of our users are at games, and you don't need ScoreStream to tell you the score of the game you're at. And so a lot of our use cases, I open up ScoreStream, I'm at a game, and I'm actually checking for the scores of the games around me. So right now in playoffs, in particular, you want to see who you're going to play next week. And so that's sort of that's what the information aspect of it. Then there's the smack talking aspect of it, where you go into the other game that you're not at and you start having the banter and that sort of thing. So there's a fair amount of that. Definitely a social platform from that perspective. From a business model perspective, a third of our revenue right now is advertising. Over the long haul, we expect that to be more and more of what we do. 2/3 of our revenue, though, is really a combination of data, syndication, and content licensing. So we send out scores, like we license our API to Snapchat. So Snapchat uses our data to create real-time geo-filters for about 5,000 games every Friday night. We have partnerships with all the TV station providers. So we actually feed our API to power on-air tickers for about 100 TV stations. So live scores Friday night on the news or during game time. And then we go into digital out of home. So we actually syndicate, we announced today, we had a press release today with NCM, which powers content into movie theaters, AMC in particular. So we have photo packages that are going to every state in the country. We're in 700 McDonald's in Southern California with hyperlocal content to each one of the restaurants. We're in Buffalo Wild Wings. We're going in Applebee's. So it's a combination of this data syndication and content licensing and then media over time.
Very good. Yeah, I was going to ask about Buffalo Wild Wings. So basically, it's pretty cool if you go in and you see all the digital signage and you start to see the scores, and you're like, oh, what's that? And then there's local prep leagues. It looks like it's a real sports media property.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, like, you got your local McDonald's in a particular community, but you're feeding in the local sports into that McDonald's. I understand.
That's correct, yeah. So what we do is we geofence every single location, and we'll do real-time scores, photos, and videos for that particular location. So, you could say, I want all of the high schools within 10 miles of a particular neighborhood in Dallas, or if I'm in Amarillo, I want 60 miles of Amarillo. So we'll have all those scores on a Friday night real time as the games are happening. And part of the thing that we always joke about as a company is like 3 things motivate people: money, fame, and narcissism. And we don't have any money, so we really focus on the fame and narcissism. And it's a really great experience for a consumer to walk into a sports bar on a Friday night and see a picture of a kid they know who just scored a touchdown, or a video of that. Cool. Well, I'm glad to hear it.
That's good. We're looking for billion-dollar ideas, but we got $1 million ones, a place to start. So yeah. Well, and let's take it a little broader into business model. And David, I'll pass it to you, but we can all comment on this. I mentioned this sort of contrast between the sort of long tail where it's about families and kids and youth and things like that, and on the other side, which by the way, there's been maybe over the last 10, 15 years, there have been multiple efforts to kind of roll that up and put advertising on top of it, but a number of companies have not made it through that. There's a company called Blue Frame that is out of Volar Video that you guys probably know, and in fact, even in the the Learfield and IMG types have tried this. So. Be straight with us here, David, right?
Sure.
So is there a way to sort of commercialize, if you will, for the benefit of the kids and the folks that play in youth sports, this space, or is it we need to think about it a little bit differently business model-wise?
Yeah, it's really hard to get corporate dollars for smaller audiences. I think that's sort of obvious, and the access to those dollars is more and more competitive now than it's ever been, with more and more choices and platforms and mediums. So you've got a really crowded, noisy marketplace, and these brands are trying to make decisions. Some of them are using archaic models, CPMs and the like, and not really placing enough importance on the experience, right? So youth sports is pretty visceral. It's just that the numbers, when you start getting down to the local level, and you seem to have figured that out well, so good for you, but when you get down to the local level, it becomes more and more expensive to market to a smaller and smaller group of people unless you use 21st century technology and different modeling, and you factor in some of the emotive piece. So we work with, one of my largest clients is the New York City Public Schools. There are 400,000 high school kids in varsity athletics, in the public schools at the high school level. Only 40,000 of them play varsity athletics. So that's still a relatively large number, but it's not a large number when you compare it to the number of students that are at the high school level. We've worked pretty hard trying to get brands to engage in a way where it's appropriate, because we don't want to hang Nike swooshes in classrooms, but there is an opportunity there. And I think we at Keemotion, sort of segueing back to Keemotion, we don't generate $1 from advertising. So our whole model is more B2B SaaS driven. We're a technology provider for leagues and teams to help them coach their players better, and to use our feed in arenas where there's broadcast capability and the rights aren't taken. And we stress tested the corporate model pretty rigorously. We also stress tested the youth sports market. Yep. At our price point, it just became really hard for us to use that as a model that we thought we could create a multiple for, because we're an early stage company. So long-winded answer. Yep. I think it's really hard to find corporate dollars. I think the brands are using antiquated ways to measure. Everything is fragmented. There's a lot of new technology. Sometimes I've been to a bunch of conferences, and I was part of an accelerator program. You guys will like this. And there's so much new technology out there, and so many different ways that people are trying to acquire, distribute, generate content. Half the time with a lot of the early stage companies that you talk to, it's hard to figure out what they do. Yep. Because they just feel like they're talking to people like us, and they're not actually talking to the brand, to the consumer. So, how monetizing fan engagement for maximum efficiency, yep. What does that mean? And so I think we're in a little bit of a state as an industry where we got to drill down a little bit and make it a little more palatable, not only to the technology world, but also to the consumer and the brands. I think people are confused.
I'd love to pile on that. I mean, I think we spent a year trying to sell direct, and it was an absolute waste of time. And I think it's, to your point, I think part of it is that that you have your 25-year-old ad buyer who doesn't necessarily like sports, and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to buy sports. That means I buy NFL, I buy college.
That's right.
And I don't even know what NAIA is, and I certainly don't know what high school is. And so getting them to get their heads around trying to buy something that we can segment every single part of the country, whether it's rural North Dakota or downtown Manhattan, getting their heads around that is really difficult. When the easy thing is like, you get to a certain point in that process, and they're like, well, I'll just go buy your audience on Facebook or Google. And you're like, wow, this has been fun.
Right.
And I think part of it too, at least from my company's view, is we are delivering a hyper-focused audience. They want this content. They're going to sit through commercials. They're going to sit through pre-roll, mid-roll, whatever you throw at them, because they want to be there. They're not going to turn the channel. Right. They are tuning in specifically for that game. So. Yeah, I mean, it all depends on what you're talking about. So, I mean, we have D1 conferences and big games where, we'll have 100,000 people watching. But what you have at the smaller levels is, there are important games where you'll have an audience and you'll have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people watching, and they're really engaged, and they're a lot of times local to that community. So if you go out and sell local, then you've got a good focused audience for that.
And I would add to you, I mean, from our perspective, so of the 7,000 high school football games that are Friday night, we'll routinely have games with between 500 to 1,000 people in each game. Then we'll have a chunk of games where there's just like 5 or 10 or whatever. But across that whole audience, you can segment that audience regionally or however you want. And you're talking for us on mobile only, we're probably doing 150,000 mobile actives on a Friday night. We tried to, and we're just doing network right now. We're getting decent CPMs for network. And if you look at the quality, if you were to open our app and look at the ads, you'll see it looks like they're branded ads, but it's all network right now.
And actually, it's a good segue, too, for you, JD, is that you were recently, or you can take me through this, but yep. So Presto provides website services to these colleges, yep. And then Stretch Internet's doing hosting and video streaming, et cetera, et cetera. Along comes a company, Club Essentials, backed by August Capital? Battery Ventures, so a major private equity firm. Talk to us about Club Essentials and why they bought Stretch and what they see in terms of the business model in the future.
I think they have a good vision of having a college sports division that can cover everything that a school could possibly need. So right now, obviously, we're covering the website, which is the big thing, the video streaming, which is a big thing. We have stats entry and stats display and all of that good stuff. But looking at mobile, looking at ticketing, looking at fan engagement, having all of these companies or building them internally, having all of these options to where you don't have to take a third-party API and do something with it, or a plug-in on the site or things like that. Basically having a one-stop shop.
But so Club Essentials is serving clubs, like gyms. Take me through that a little bit.
So yeah,
I think that's the logic that makes it interesting for me. It's this is not a media business. I can maybe have some sponsorship associated with it. I do some of that, but I'm serving all these clubs that might have a few thousand members, and they're paying $200 a month. They're seeing an analog to that business.
Yeah, it's a subscription revenue model. being a member of a health club or a country club, you're paying your monthly dues. So obviously, the sports space in a monetization space, you can have a recurring, $9.99 or $15.99 or whatever it is a month to watch this this certain school or certain conference's event. So they see just it as another way of reaching an audience and having income that's monthly deliverable. That's a recurring revenue stream, just like any of their other businesses. So it does fit from that standpoint, even though it's not something that's specific to college sports. And that's also the nice thing. I mentioned college sports division, so we do have our own president. We have we're separated out from that business as well, but we can also deliver across products in terms of putting video streaming and video services into health clubs. Being able to localize content at country clubs in the bars and whatnot, and feed localized games to it. Those are all things that are going to come down the line.
Any questions, really briefly? Any questions? I wanted to tee up another quick comment for everybody to comment on, which is, so you do have what I would say is sort of social streaming now, right? So you have Facebook. We had the Periscope. Kind of went up. Where did that go? You had Meerkat. This was very hot. Facebook put a lot of money into it. You have YouTube Live. Where do you guys see the sort of social streaming platforms fitting in to your business? And then I'll just let you think about that for 2 seconds. I ran a survey. Philip mentioned this, and so I'll take you guys through a couple of data points. There's at least 1 or 2 slides that's interesting. But do you see anything on the social side that's impacting your business? Have there been brands that have come to you, oh, I've got a Facebook app, I need to do it, and I need an automated production? Or for you, have you seen ways that,
we see.
obviously you did the Snapchat deal, but what else?
I think we don't do, we do 30-second clips and we do photos. We're not full game, we don't do that. But we do see, we do a lot of stuff where, much like high school is sort of a long tail thing, we do a lot of stuff internationally. So we have like women's professional handball in Poland, and we have American football in the UK and Italy. And what we see there a lot is a lot of people using YouTube as a platform with the chat aspect of that, and a lot of Facebook Live stuff. I would say those are the things, unlike the NFHS networks, Play on Sports stuff. I think it's really, mom and pop, bootstrapped, people using Facebook and YouTube a lot. And that's, I think, anybody who's playing in the space adjacent to those guys, I'd be concerned.
So a show of hands in the audience. How many people think what Facebook Live's doing with the chat, what YouTube Live's doing with the chat, what Twitch does with the chat and the super chat? Raise your hands. Is that the future of sports streaming? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah. Okay, good. So let me just take you guys through this survey really quickly. So I asked people, have you watched a live stream on a social platform in the past month? And a lot of folks have. I've screened those out that haven't. So this is just for people that actually do it. And I thought I might see esports as the highest. We do see movies and TV series. Philip pointed out that there could be a lack of clarity there. But it's kind of interesting. I see sports a little lower on this chart than I might have otherwise guessed. That's kind of an interesting thing to note. Really, what's the best platform for this? YouTube. I ran this actually 2 years ago as well. YouTube was high back then. Twitch was almost nothing back then. Periscope and Twitter really seem to have lost out on anything that might exist here in this space. That's sort of interesting. And Instagram, obviously, having made some progress. Well, why? Why is that interesting? Well, the hosts, obviously, is clearly a part of it. Makes me feel like I'm participating in the event, is 35.8%. Behind the scenes content, et cetera. But I would say this, and I've done this quite a bit, the ability to chat and interact during the stream is only 20% or 21%. So that's usually a little lower number than I would have guessed or have liked to have seen. Now I've done these studies a bunch, so I know that people really don't love it that much, but I'm always sort of intrigued to find. Here's a little word cloud of the types of things that people are actually watching when they think about what their favorite live streaming platform was. And then last one, so this one's, I guess, a little bit of an optimistic one to leave on. So for those that have said, I asked them, what was your favorite live streaming event? And then I say, well, how much did you enjoy watching the live stream? And you get a very high number on that score, which is nice, right? It means they're actually enjoying it. And then finally, it's a little bit of a throwaway, but I thought, it's interesting, this new format, and I'll leave you guys with this question, the stories format. How does that, maybe that plays into your business model a little bit better than others. Do you guys see the stories format, or JD, for you, do you see the stories format as being a more important format as live streaming, or threatening the live streaming content format?
I have 4 teenagers, so I mean, for them, I think that's the thing I struggle with the play on networks is, no one's going to pay, or my kids won't pay $11 to watch 2 hours of a high school football game. They'll watch 30-second clips all day long. And so I think that the stories encapsulates that view, that it's snackable content. I just want to see the highlights. And I think, for better or worse, that is a demographic shift. Yep.
Yeah, and I think the automated highlights that we talked about and the technology's getting there to where we can, there are companies that can do that. That can take a 2-hour game even afterwards if you want to clip highlights, and in 10 minutes you have all your 30-second clips you need. You can make a highlight reel or have a couple plays that you want to use in kind of a story format, or you have a YouTube highlight video straight off of that content, which is really interesting. Just one thing to touch on the social side. I mean, I think syndication's great. I mean, we do it to get as many eyeballs on the school and on the school's content as we can. But something that those platforms aren't necessarily delivering for them right now is a branded solution that's around their advertising, their branding, that sort of thing. So that's something that we're still, we can still hang our hat on is, hey, you can, embed this onto your website and have your branding around it, or we have an end user portal. You can sell all your advertising there, you can do everything and have it be 100% yours versus taking whatever they have. And also just from a linkability standpoint, makes it really easy. If there's one destination they can click on and make sure all the games are there.
Any other dynamics you want to share?
I mean, one of the things that seems to be missing a little bit when you get to the bottom of the pyramid in terms of the size of the audiences that are hyper-local is that we're sort of lacking influencers. And when you see the impact that influencers have using 21st century technology like social media, it's pretty astounding the way they're able to monetize things like makeup. And I don't wear any makeup, but I know half the world does. Yeah. Right? And so, music, fashion, makeup, somehow in sports, we have influencers at the top of the pyramid, but we don't have influencers at the middle or the bottom. And I think that would be a really good place for some of us all to kind of focus.
That's actually pretty darn insightful. I appreciate that comment. I was actually going to ask you, JD, about whether kids these days, it used to be the SIDs and the video guys were a little bit of the geeks, right? And the guys on the field don't. Like, I was curious whether kids coming up are like, yeah, actually, I can use my, temporary fame here in high school sports to gin up my followers on social. But are you seeing that at all?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it a little bit, and there's a couple of different ways we're seeing it. So, the YouTube influencer that everybody talks about, we're seeing that a little bit in the sports space, but we also run into issues there where you have to maintain eligibility. The NCAA doesn't like you doing that as a side or a hobby. So there's that hurdle. But one of the big things that I think we're seeing is with the newspaper industry dying, then the high school newspaper industry has been dying. So what's next for them? And obviously video is the next step there. So what we're seeing is some very focused programs in high schools all throughout the country that are training people, vocationally very, very well, but also giving them skills to take that into their lives and become social creators as well on those social media platforms. So there's a lot of positive going on with the video movement with our youth. It's just focus and directing it in positive directions versus negative directions that we all fight on.
The influencers, I would say, the eligibility, the coaches, the schools, the school district all have issues. Action sports, whole different animal. Skating, surfing, there's influencers there. I mean, it's just a different thing.
Interesting.
One more quick point. Is that one of the things that I've found when I've invested in a couple hardware software companies, sat on a few boards, early stage, looked at the paperwork, valuations, go-to-market strategy, proof of concept, et cetera. And one of the things that I find from a lot of the early stage companies that I've looked at is the lack of, and you'll forgive me because I spent too much time in advertising and marketing at Interpublic and at Octagon, but I feel like the poor stepchild for a lot of these early business plans is like a real commitment to the message and marketing and what you're actually trying to say to who. And I'll use Keemotion as a good example. We have amazing technology that's really state of the art and probably best in class for what we do. Automated broadcast quality production, no cameraman. And we don't have in my opinion, as an investor and a board member, we don't have nearly a robust enough commitment to the marketing, the messaging, the collateral, doing things like this. And I think in order for the companies to rise above the clutter, I think many of them should spend a little bit more time focusing on the message and thinking about not just the way we talk to each other, but the way we're actually talking to the people who are going to subscribe, who are going to buy. And it's hard in the same way that brands are always trying to quantify ROI based on CPMs. It's sometimes hard when you have a limited budget and you only raise a certain amount of money to invest in the softer side of things. But I think the halo of what that can represent has exponential potential. So.
Well, as a marketing guy, I'd love to leave it there. It's a great message. I want to give a big...
Sorry,
do we
I
have
live
any
in 30,000 feet, probably a little too much.
No, I think it was great. Are there any questions?
Hold on just a second. We want you to talk into the mic so the recording gets your question.
All right. There was a mention about automated sports highlights. Can the panel talk about that? Or?
Yeah, sure. I think, JD, you mentioned Really.
Yeah, so we've been doing instant highlights as a manual process in our company since 2013, but we've recently started working with a company, Really, which is basically automating that, and they can automate it live in real time. So we work with the America East Conference, and the America East is using them right now for all sports, basically being able to use various technology that they have, both audio cues and video cues, to find what an important play is and be able to present it to somebody and say, hey, do you want to tweet this out? This seemed like it was an important play. It was a goal in soccer, or it was a touchdown in football, things like that. So there are a lot of other companies working in that space as well, and it kind of comes hand in hand a bit with automated production. I mean, for what you guys do with the coaching side of it, you get all of the plays with a certain player. You can get all of that granular.
I think there's another company I'll make a shout out, which is FanTag, right? Because then you've got automation happening, which AWS and others are providing AI. So it's, here's an event, here's an event, here's an event. I do think it's sort of interesting. This FanTag is also adding the crowdsourced piece of it, which is kind of a little more touching on what you guys are doing. And so AI and ML, I'm always a big fan. It's machines and humans together, right? And so this is kind of an interesting future, I think. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Any other questions?
Come on.
All right.
Let's hear it.
Nobody else. Well, let's give it up for these guys. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you.